Gunslinger took out a Bandit, then found his own name on the wanted poster. The boots were still warm when he stepped into town. Not just warm, alive with the heat of a man who'd bled out 5 minutes ago in the alley behind the livery stable. The gunslinger didn't look at them. He didn't need to. He knew the scuff on the left toe, the cracked heel stitched with black thread, his brother's boots. He'd bought them for him in Dodge City 3 winters back, before the fever took their mother and the drought stole their land. Now they were stained with blood that wasn't his own. He walked slow, like a man carrying a coffin made of silence. Dust clung to his coat like it had been waiting. The sun hung heavy over the tin-roofed buildings, bleaching color from everything, the porch swings, the hitching posts, even the faces of the men watching him from behind saloon windows. No one spoke. No one moved. But their eyes followed him like wolves tracking a wounded deer. Behind him, the body lay where it fell, sprawled across broken whiskey bottles and a half-eaten apple. The bandits had rolled into the dirt. The gunslinger hadn't meant to kill him. Not really. The man had pulled first, cocky, drunk, waving a revolver like it was a Bible. "You ain't no law," he'd slurred. "Just another dog with a gun." And the gunslinger had answered with 2 shots. One to the chest. One to the head. He'd done it without thinking. Like breathing. Like the years had taught him, if you hesitate, you die. But now, standing in the middle of Main Street, he felt something he hadn't felt since the night his wife died, cold. A child screamed. A woman pulled her boy inside the general store. Then, from the front of the saloon, someone spat. And that's when he saw it. Nailed to the weather-beaten post beside the door, a new wanted poster, ink still wet. His face. His name. Elias Crow. Wanted dead or alive. Reward, 500. His breath caught like a splinter in his throat. That wasn't his name anymore. It hadn't been for 10 years. He'd buried Elias Crow under a pine tree in Colorado after the bank job went bad. After the deputy got shot. After the whole damn town burned down trying to find him. He'd taken a new name then, Jesse Hargrove. Quiet. Unremarkable. A man who fixed wagon wheels and kept to himself. Now, someone had dug him up. And put him on a wall. He turned slowly, scanning the crowd. Faces blurred, farmers with calloused hands, merchants with gold teeth, a preacher holding a Bible like a shield. No one met his eyes. No one dared. Then he saw the marshal. Old man Calloway. Gray hair, limp in his right leg from a bullet fired by a train robber 20 years back. The same man who'd found Elias bleeding out in the snow outside Fort Laramie, dragged him into a cabin, fed him stew, and said, "Son, you're not born evil. You're just lost." He'd saved Elias's life that day. And now, he stood on the saloon steps, staring at the poster, then at the boots. Then at Jesse. The marshal didn't say a word. But his hand drifted to his holster. And that's when Jesse knew. This wasn't about justice. This was about revenge. Someone had seen him kill the bandit. Someone had known who he was. And someone had paid to make sure the world remembered. The wind picked up, rolling dust across the street like a shroud. A crow landed on the sign above the saloon, its wings spread wide, black against the sun. It cawed once. Then flew off, leaving only silence. Jesse reached down. Picked up the boots. Slung them over his shoulder. No one stopped him. No one breathed. He walked past the church, past the bakery smelling of burnt flour, past the well where women drew water in silence. At the edge of town, he paused. Looked back. The poster flapped in the breeze. His face stared back. Like a ghost wearing his skin. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just whispered into the wind, "I didn't ask for this. The desert swallowed his voice. And the road ahead stretched empty. Beneath his boots, the earth cracked open. As if it knew what was coming. He slept under a wagon that night, wrapped in the wool blanket his wife had stitched before the fever took her. Her name was still there, Lillian, sewn in faded blue thread along the hem, each stitch trembling with memory. He'd carried it for 7 years. Through snowstorms in Wyoming, through dust storms in New Mexico, through nights when the coyotes sang like mourning mothers. It smelled of lavender now, not from flowers, but from the soap she used to wash his shirts before he left. He kept it close because if he let go of the smell, he'd forget her voice. The bread came at dawn. He traded his last silver buckle, the one with the wolf's head his father carved, for 2 slices of hard, crusty loaf from the baker's stall. The man didn't speak. Just handed it over with eyes that had seen too much. His hands shook. Not from age. From fear. Jesse didn't blame him. The poster had spread by sunrise. By noon, every child in town knew his face. By dusk, even the dogs avoided him. Elias Crow, the boy muttered as he passed, clutching his mother's skirt. The man who killed the outlaw. Jesse stopped. Looked down. The boy couldn't have been 6. Barefoot. Dirt-streaked cheeks. Eyes wide with wonder, not hatred. Not yet. Was he bad? The boy asked. Jesse opened his mouth. Closed it. He wanted to say yes. Wanted to say, yes, he was a thief. A liar. A coward who shot a man in the back. But then he remembered the bandit's face, not as a monster, but as a man. Pale lips. Blood on his teeth. A wedding ring glinting on his finger. A locket tucked inside his coat. Jesse hadn't taken it. Couldn't bring himself to. So he just nodded. And the boy smiled. Like he'd just been given a truth worth keeping. That night, Jesse sat by a dying fire outside the abandoned blacksmith's shed, chewing bread so dry it scraped his throat. He ate slowly. Like each bite might be his last. Across the street, the baker stood on his porch, watching. Not with anger. With sorrow. He set down a cup of water beside the door. No note. No words. Just steam rising into the cold air. Jesse didn't move. Didn't trust it. Until the moon rose high enough to cast shadows long enough to hide him. Then he crept forward. Picked up the cup. Sipped. It tasted like mercy. And it broke him. He wept then, silent, shaking, tears falling into the dirt like rain on dry earth. No sound escaped him. No prayer. Just the weight of a man who'd done wrong, and still didn't deserve this. A hoofbeat cracked the silence. 2 of them. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the east. He didn't reach for his gun. Didn't need to. He already knew. They weren't lawmen. Lawmen didn't ride like hunters. They rode like men who'd been promised blood. He stood. Shouldered the blanket. Tucked the last piece of bread into his coat. The fire died behind him. The stars blinked cold above. Somewhere, a train whistle screamed in the distance, long and low, like a dying animal. He walked away without looking back. But as he vanished into the dark, the baker stepped off his porch. Kneeled. Pressed his forehead to the ground. Whispered something into the dust. Something that sounded like, "Forgive me." And somewhere, far beyond the ridge, a woman's voice sang a lullaby. Only Jesse heard it. Because only he remembered how Lillian used to sing. The church stood like a tomb carved from rotting wood. No bell. No cross. Just a sagging roof and windows boarded up with planks that hadn't seen paint in 30 years. But inside, there was light. A single candle. Flickering. On the altar. And kneeling before it, head bowed, hands folded over a child's shoe. The marshal didn't hear him come in. Didn't turn. Just kept praying. Or pretending to. Jesse stood in the doorway, boots caked with dust, rifle hanging loose at his side. He could have killed him then. Could have pulled the trigger and ended it all, the chase, the name, the weight of every man he'd ever shot. One bullet. One silence. No more ghosts. But he didn't move. Because the marshal looked broken. Not old. Not tired. Broken. Like a tree split by lightning, still standing, but hollow inside. "I knew you'd come," the marshal said, voice cracked like dry riverbed. Jesse stepped forward. "You framed me." "No," the marshal didn't look up. "I buried your brother." Jesse froze. His fingers tightened around the rifle stock. "You, what?" "I'm not lying." A pause. Then, softer, "Your brother wasn't just a bandit, Jesse. He was my deputy." Jesse remembered now, faintly, the day his brother vanished. The posse came through town asking questions. Said he'd stolen government gold. Said he'd murdered 3 men near the Santa Fe Trail. Said he'd been last seen riding east with a man named Cowboy. He'd assumed his brother had gone bad. Had chosen the outlaw life. Turns out, he'd been trying to do right. He found out who was really stealing the gold, the marshal whispered. Men in the governor's pocket. Men who paid off sheriffs, burned towns to cover their tracks. Your brother gathered proof. Send it to me. I hid it. Then they came for him. Jesse swallowed hard. They killed him. No, the marshal finally lifted his head. His eyes were wet. Not with grief. With guilt. I did. Silence. Thick as smoke. Jesse's throat closed. You let me become this, Jesse said. You let me kill men. Let me lose everything. All so you could keep your job. Your reputation. I didn't know you'd come back, the marshal choked. I didn't know you'd be the one to kill him. Jesse reached into his coat. Pulled out the locket. The one he'd taken from the dead bandit's chest. He held it up. Moonlight slipped through a crack in the wall, glinting off the metal. Inside, a faded photo of 2 boys. One in a sheriff's badge. One holding a rifle. His brother. Him. I wore this, Jesse said, voice hollow, because I thought it was my only piece of family left. He dropped the locket onto the floor. It landed with a soft clink. Then he turned. Walked toward the door. Behind him, the marshal sobbed, quiet, ragged, like a man who'd lost his soul and didn't know how to bury it. Where are you going? The marshal called. Jesse paused. Didn't turn. I'm going to find the men who ordered the gold stolen. And then? I'm going to make sure no one else has to wear a name they didn't earn. The door groaned open. Wind rushed in. Carrying the scent of rain. And something else. Gunpowder. Someone was coming. And they weren't here to talk. The letter had been there all along. Tucked inside the inner pocket of his duster, the one he'd stolen off a dead courier in Texas 3 years back, the one that still smelled like ink and sweat and desperation. He'd never opened it. Didn't want to. Letters meant endings. And he wasn't ready for endings. But tonight, under a sky choked with stars and the distant howl of coyotes, he pulled it out. Paper brittle as old bone. Folding creases cracked like dried riverbeds. He unfolded it slowly, afraid if he moved too fast, the words might vanish like smoke. It was from his sister, Clara. Written 2 weeks before she died. He remembered the day she mailed it. She'd walked 12 miles through snow to the nearest post office, her boots split at the seams, her fingers blue with cold. She'd written him every month after he left, until the letters stopped coming. Now, here it was. Dear Jesse, I know you won't read this till you're far gone. But I'm writing anyway. You always said silence was your armor. Well, mine's faith. And I've got enough for both of us. The farm's gone. The drought took the wheat. The bank took the land. We sold the oxen last fall to buy medicine for Ma. She didn't make it past March. Papa followed in May, heart gave out, they say. He kept muttering your name. Said he saw you riding home on a white horse. I told him you would. I still believe it. I saved your share. Every penny. $52.07. Hidden in the floorboard under the hearthstone. If you ever come back, take it. Buy yourself a new coat. A real bed. Maybe even a wife who doesn't mind your silence. Don't let the dust take your soul, Jesse. I know you think you're already lost. But you're not. Not yet. You're still the boy who carried me on your shoulders when the creek rose. Who sang off-key to keep me from crying. Who cried himself when the preacher said we'd see Ma again. I don't care what you've done out there. I don't care what they call you. To me, you're still my brother. And I love you more than the wind loves the prairie. If you're reading this, you're alive. And that's enough. Clara, he read it once. Then again. And then, he couldn't. His hands shook so bad the paper rattled like a dying bird. He pressed it to his chest. Tried to breathe. But the air wouldn't come. Outside, the fire had burned low. Only embers glowed red, casting long shadows across the ground. A lone owl called from the canyon rim, mournful, slow, like it knew what was coming. He thought of Clara's face. The way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. The way she used to braid his hair before church, humming that stupid tune about the moon and the mill. She hadn't known he'd become a killer. She hadn't known he'd buried his own name. She hadn't known he'd worn her brother's boots into town, and left his soul behind. He reached into his pocket again. Found the locket. The one from the Bandit. He opened it. Stared at the photo. 2 boys. One in a sheriff's badge. One holding a rifle. He looked down at his own hands. Calloused. Scarred. Black with gunpowder residue. These were the hands that held his daughter's first bottle. That buried his wife. That pulled triggers. That killed men who didn't deserve to die. He closed the locket. Pressed it against his heart. Then he folded Clara's letter again, gently, and tucked it back inside. Not to hide it. To remember. He stood. Walked to the edge of the camp. Looked up. The Milky Way stretched above him, endless, silent, indifferent. He whispered to the stars, I'm sorry. No answer came. Just the wind. And the distant whistle of a train, closer now. He knew what it meant. They'd found him. The real men behind the gold theft. The ones who'd hired the marshal. The ones who'd turned his brother into a ghost. And now, they were coming for him. He picked up his rifle. Checked the load. Made sure the hammer clicked true. Then he did something he hadn't done in 10 years. He knelt. Kissed the barrel. Whispered, help me be good one last time. The coyotes fell silent. The wind held its breath. And somewhere, just beyond the ridge, a single lantern flickered to life. Then another. Then 10. Coming fast. Not like lawmen. Like wolves. With orders. Jesse stood. Slung the rifle. adjusted the blanket over his shoulder, and began to walk, not away, but toward them. Because Clara had believed in him. And maybe, just maybe, he could believe in himself again. Even if it cost him everything. Dawn came slow, gray and thin, like a sigh between heartbeats. The town didn't stir. No chickens clucked. No dogs barked. Even the wind held its breath as Jesse walked barefoot through the dust toward the jailhouse steps. He wore no coat now. Only the duster, torn at the shoulder, stained with sweat and blood from 3 days of running. His boots were gone, left behind in the canyon where he'd shed them, along with the last of his fear. His rifle hung loose in his grip, not raised, not ready to kill. Just carried. Like a burden he was finally willing to put down. Behind him, the sun crested the ridge. Before him, the marshal stood at the top of the steps. Flanked by 6 men, all in dark coats, all with Colt revolvers low on their hips, all silent as grave diggers. They weren't law. They were debt collectors. Men who paid for silence with bullets. And they'd come for the man who knew too much. The marshal didn't draw. Didn't speak. Just looked at Jesse, eyes hollow, lips trembling. Jesse stopped 10 paces away. Looked past the men. Past the boarded-up windows. Past the children pressed against the saloon door, wide-eyed and quiet. He saw the wanted poster still nailed to the post. His face. His name. Elias Crow. He reached into his coat. Slowly. Every eye followed. Every finger hovered over steel. He pulled out Clara's letter. Not to fight. Not to threaten. But to let it go. He held it up, just for a moment, so the wind could catch it. Then he let it slip from his fingers. It fluttered like a wounded bird. Landed softly at the marshal's boots. The marshal stared at it. Blinked. Then bent. Picked it up. Read it. And wept. One tear. Then another. Fell onto the paper. Smudged the ink. Made her words bleed. Jesse didn't look away. He looked at the sky. At the clouds turning gold. At the lark singing above the church tower, the first sound in hours. He thought of Lillian. Of Clara. Of his daughter's laugh, the one he hadn't heard since she was 2. He thought of his brother. Of the man he'd killed. Of the life he'd buried. And then, he did something no outlaw ever did. He dropped his hat. Let it fall. It landed in the dust. Like a surrender. Like a prayer. The lead gunman stepped forward. Crow, he said. You've caused enough trouble. Jesse smiled. Small. Quiet. Like a man who'd found peace after a long war. I'm not Elias Crow, he said. The man frowned. Ain't no matter what you call yourself. You're the one they want. No, Jesse shook his head. I'm the one who tried to be good. Silence. Thick. Heavy. The wind stilled. Even the lark paused. Then, the gunman raised his revolver. Last chance, he growled. Jesse closed his eyes. Didn't pray. Didn't beg. Just whispered to the sky, I'm sorry I took so long. The shot cracked. Echoed off the buildings. Rang through the empty street. Jesse staggered. Didn't fall. Not yet. Blood bloomed across his chest, dark as the desert soil after rain. He looked down. Then back up. At the children. At the baker, clutching his apron. At the marshal, holding Clara's letter like it was holy. And he smiled again. This time, true. Because for the first time in 10 years, he wasn't afraid. The second shot came. Then the third. Each one slower than the last. As if even death hesitated to take him. He sank to his knees. Then sat back, legs crossed like he was waiting for supper. His head lolled slightly. His eyes stayed open. Staring at the sky. The sun broke full over the horizon. Golden light spilled across his face. For a moment, he looked like a boy again. Not a killer. Not a ghost. Just Jesse. The boy who carried his sister on his shoulders. The man who loved too quietly. The brother who never gave up. The last breath left his lips. Not in a gasp. Not in a cry. But in a whisper, soft as cotton in the wind, Lillian, then, silence. Not the silence of death. The silence of peace. The crowd didn't move. Didn't cheer. Didn't curse. They just watched. The marshal knelt beside him. Gently closed his eyes. Took off his own badge. Laid it on Jesse's chest. Then stood. Turned to the men. "You don't get to decide who he was," he said, voice steady for the first time in decades. "And you sure as hell don't get to decide what he died for." The gunmen exchanged glances. Then turned. Left. One by one. No one fired again. By noon, the body was wrapped in a blanket. Buried under the old oak tree, the same one Clara had planted the year she turned 12. No headstone. No name. Just a single boot, worn thin, stitched with black thread, placed upright in the dirt. And beneath it, tucked into the roots, a locket. And a letter. The townsfolk called it the soldier's grave. They never spoke of the man who lay there. Never mentioned his name. But every child who passed that tree would stop. And touch the boot. And say, quietly, "Thank you." Years later, when the railroad came through, the stationmaster carved a sign into a piece of driftwood. He didn't write Elias Crow. Didn't write Jesse Hargrove. He wrote only, "Here lies a man who chose to remember who he was, even when the world forgot." And when the wind blew just right, folks swore they could hear a woman singing. Soft. Off-key. A lullaby. And if you listened close enough, you'd swear it sounded like love.